Hi, my name is Miguel. Thank you for joining me on this talk, adding realism to creature design with Omniverse. I wanted to remind you that I'll be available to chat during the talk, so if you guys have any questions, feel free to post those up. So a little bit about myself. I'm the character art director at NVIDIA currently. I've been in the VFX for over 20 years, working in multiple things like films, VR, commercials, etc. Here's some of the past projects that I've worked on. One of my main passions is creature design. I love creatures, any small and big. So hopefully you guys will enjoy this talk. So here's our agenda. We'll start with getting some insights. We'll be talking about generating ideas, collecting reference, and explaining the design process with Omniverse, and also showing some final renders. So I've been at NVIDIA for about two and a half years now. So have noticed some of my workflow has changed to being a little non-linear now that I've been using Omniverse for a while. Why you may ask, why is this important? It's really important when developing a character from scratch. It's crucial for me to be able to see the volumes and the forms change with actual lighting, real world lighting and shading. So I think that's really important. It also helps me make decisions on how I change my forms and how I change my model so it reacts correctly to light. Another thing that I really love is not having to export any maps. I just kind of go ahead and export the raw geometry, which is 30 million, 60 million at sometimes with my basic sculpture, and be able to just process that right away with no hiccups. So how can we leverage the technology that we currently have? Well, it's pretty amazing, right? You don't have to wait hours or days to see a render at a final film quality photoreal. You can wait a couple minutes and you'll have something that's amazing. I could jump around between the sculpting process, texturing process, and look dev, and kind of help those get evolved quicker. The other thing is that the technology is scalable. So the more GPUs you have, the better and faster things get. So you can get even quicker results. I can use the GPU to do my rendering while I'm also using the CPU to do all my sculpting and kind of see updates on the fly, like be able to just click export and see my direct output. I tend to use a USD format a lot because it's a really nice format, especially now that ZBrush supports that. I'm able to import straight into Omniverse. And if you're not that technical, it's not a big deal. It's okay. You're able to hit the ground running quick. But if you are technical, all the slots are there and attributes that you may need to make this even more complex. So coming up with an idea. So I tend to ask myself a few questions. What is the creature's job? In this case, he's kind of like an egg collector / fortune teller with those eggs that he collects. Where does he live? Where does he work? He lives in a cave and works at a black market. Strengths and weaknesses, right? Those are pretty important. He's blind, so he can't see. So it's a lot of it's going to rely on his body and hair and his skin and all that type of stuff. His hearing, right? To be able to do his task. And he also has limited mobility, so that's another big important one to add to the design. Is he nice? Is he not nice? Does he appear friendly or not? That's pretty important. In this case, he's not. He's supposed to appear pretty scary, so that kind of keeps you away from him. So one other thing, once I have these questions answered, I tend to go and gather some data, right? I tend to start making an inspiration board. So now we're going to take a look at that. So here's my inspiration reference. I tend to collect this as I'm starting my design because it helps me inform of like what direction I kind of want to go. I tend to use a naked mole right here as my main source. And that led me to finding other things like wombats, hedgehogs, and other things that they're hairless to help me kind of find those attributes I wanted on the skin and how saggy it is and how translucent it is. But as you can see, I have a wide variety of nature images. They inform me about anatomy, texture, and detail. Another board I tend to collect is also an anatomy board. I tend to put these together based on the characters that I'm using, that I'm going to be creating, because everyone's a little different. One has, maybe it's overweight, one's skinny, but they really help me to kind of ground my character to life. because I'm able to see what a heavy set person might look like, and how add those attributes to my character. Or if it's a skinny person, what does that look like? So at the end, I tend to, once I'm done with my concept design like block out, then I tend to kind of come back in here and just use this as kind of like a checker to make sure everything's looking as real as possible and grounded. So here's kind of a linear workflow where I'm kind of used to the pipeline. It has to go all the way through from sculpting to modeling, texturing, shading, look dev. But a lot of these steps, you have to wait from the sculpting concept part all the way to the end, which could take days or weeks. It could take a long time to be able to see the final frame. And that's kind of what changes with Omniverse, where I can do a lot of those steps in between and see the final result right away as I'm going, so I can make more informed decisions. And here's an example of what I'm talking about. So I'm kind of able to work in the nonlinear workflow. I'm able to start sculpting and then import my sculpt into look dev and rendering, set up some camera shots, and see what might work, what's not working. And then from there, I could refine my forms and continue to adjust things, or I can move on to modeling, and then start texturing and start seeing those results. And I could switch between all those three and see the final result of the look development and the final shot that I have. So here's a little block out of kind of the way I start. I try to get the meat and potatoes of the design kind of blocked out at a very crude, in a very crude way, just to be able to see something fast. Some of these sculpts don't take very long, maybe 20-30 minutes, but I'm able to kind of see, based on my reference board and my inspiration, kind of to which way do I want to start going. Do I want to make it more bipedal, more standing up like a human, and start implementing those elements that I was talking about, like him being blind, like his mouth kind of like having a different type of mouth. As here I'm playing with something with, he has some tendrils kind of hanging from the side, but then I decide to remove them. So at this point, I'm not being precious about anything. I'm being kind of manhandling the digital clay to kind of just get something out that resembles just a glimpse of potentially what I might be able to do doing later. At this point, I remove the arms. I don't like the way they look, so I just move on. And it's not about being precious. It's just being rough and being able to have something that I can take into Omniverse and start checking. But I'm also looking at the overall structure, making sure everything feels the same level of finish or even the same level of roughness, like the back, the front, the head. So no details. It's just like broad strokes at this point. So from there, I kind of take this stage and I go into more like, these are the blocking stages that we just kind of finished, right? These are the different stages that I tend to use to kind of take into Omniverse, check my volumes, check my shapes, see if the design overall is working. And if it's not, I can make adjustments. But I just kind of want to give you kind of like a quick preview of what you're going to be seeing in the next couple slides. And here, we went from having no legs to having legs to refining the overall, having everything, a block out for everything, and then the final result where he's like fully blocked out and everything is working. So as I'm going with those blockouts, from that first blockout that you guys saw, the meat and potatoes one, I started playing around with lighting. So I import that into Omniverse. I set up a few HDRs. There's a nice library that comes with Omniverse. And I tend to look at this from a distance and close up. And that's something that you're going to see over and over as I have the different versions, kind of always zooming out and zooming in, so that I'm not too precious about one specific thing or start detailing too soon. And here I start changing the lighting to be a little harsher to kind of inform me of things that are not working in the silhouette, or like I could see proportions like his skull is too small, so I'm going to have to change that and give him a little more cranium. He feels kind of wimpy. I'm not really scared of him right now. I'm also setting up the OmniSurface shader with one of the presets for skin, which is pretty awesome. Doing that to kind of save me time in this concept stage. But if you wanted to, you could really go in there and deep and really change so many attributes. But in this case, since it's just a concept and everything else overall is pretty nice, I'm just changing the roughness a little bit to spread that specularity around a little bit. And I also, the main thing I start changing is the scale of the subsurface, because it depends on your model. If it's an insect or if it's something like, like a person, there's going to be different scales that are all going to work. So here I'm playing with those, having him more transparent, less translucent. So I'm kind of dialing those in, testing things around, moving around the object. Even at this crude form, it looks like it has no, like it's going nowhere. But believe me, this is starts to take shape with this lighting. The other thing I tend to do is also grab the environment or grab some lights and turn them around. Like start playing around with the light. Like if I had a physical model, move a flashlight around or move a lamp around it. So I tend to do that with this. And you can really start seeing things that are working or not. You know, like some of the primary shapes need to be less bumpy, integrated better. Maybe the volumes aren't quite the right size. But I'm taking notes as I'm going around this model now and kind of looking at different parts of it. You know, looking at the head, looking at the chest, looking at the arm position. And I ask myself, am I scared of this guy? Not really. He's kind of wimpy, right? But it all starts with this, and then we continue to evolve it. So, you know, even when I change the lights around, I still play around with the materials a little bit. You can always keep playing around with it, but for me, I tend to kind of do a round of this type of stuff, you know, playing with the different profiles, and then seeing what kind of fits in my eyes. You know, what kind of skin transparency do I want? Do I want this to be really transparent, or do I want this to have like you know, a different type of look? But I really like this because it's so interactive and you can see it's real time. You can really see the results, and some of the stuff is not even connected all the way. It's just like shapes that are kind of blobbed in together with ZRemesh. So once I find something that I'm pretty happy with, that I'm like, okay, this is the ballpark, I kind of set my cameras and I set the shader and stop touching the shader. Because if not, you can spend hours kind of tweaking this stuff, but the point is to kind of move quickly. So from here, here's a couple of different other options of the Omni surface that you can see, like how I can create a creature that looks like it's made of water or waxy chicken skin or even honey, and make these look pretty photoreal right away. But here we're seeing that block out now. You know, it's set. I set up the shaders and some of the lighting. So from there, I take it back to ZBrush, adjust some proportions, made them a little wider. It's not quite working kind of what I want, but that's fine because it's evolving. So from here, we're starting to look at the arms. The arms look too long, and I need to start blocking out the rest of the torso and legs just to see him as a whole. You know, like, is he menacing? Is he not? So here we start changing the proportions of the head a little bit and adding legs just to balance him out a little bit. So we see the overall maquette or the overall character as one thing. So one of the things that I kind of wanted, since he kind of has limited mobility, I wanted to give him a hunchback. So it makes it harder for him to steal eggs or do whatever he needs to do. So here I'm kind of playing with that and really crude, just quick sculpting. And then I go and kind of refine those shapes a little bit to kind of make them blend better and feel more, you know, in unity. So from there, I move back to the head, looking at it, you know, without any detail. I kind of erase any detail that I might have or any bumpy surfaces so that I can see the true forms, you know, and where I potentially might need to break them up. So from here, I start adding more of the hunchback part, giving him broader shoulders, starting to roll those in. But of course, no detail. That's the main thing. No detail. Continue on the forms. So here, I start blocking. Now that I'm pretty happy with the upper part of the torso, I start working on the hands, giving him some length to his arms, working on his belly a little bit. Changing the lighting around, that's pretty important for me, because I'm able to see that if what I have is working or not, because sometimes it feels like it is, and then you change the lighting and it completely breaks. So one thing I'm able to do quickly is see it with different world environments that really work, and the way you would light a real shot for VFX or anything else, and see if it's working. So here I go back to my kind of hero shot that I wanted to establish and see how that's working. As you can see, the details are starting to kind of disappear, and I'm getting away and cleaning my forms. Going down to check out the hands. Now that I feel pretty happy with the top, I'm starting to work myself down. It's pretty primitive, but you can start seeing where it's going to start leading to. And I can also see the attributes of the shader. Like right now, it's a little too translucent, a little too much subsurface. And I start to add more elements like legs, knees, calves, From there, I start, once I have everything blocked out, as you can see, the feet and the ankles are just simple spheres and cubes that I just manhandle to make them feel like they're part of the design, to make sure there's something there. And I feel like now, okay, his arms are a little too long. I need to play around with the finger lengths as well and look at overall his posture. He's feeling very, I guess, top heavy. Playing around with the light again. Like I was saying earlier, I always keep switching back and forth. Just see how he will look like backlit, because most of the time he'll probably be backlit because he's kind of scary. He wouldn't have any supermodel type of lighting. It's really important to work on the back as well. I know a lot of artists avoid it, but I tend to kind of work at everything before I do any secondary, tertiary details. Block those in, simple forms, check them out, refine them, maybe change the pose a little bit, and now he feels like he has more weight based on that references that I was looking at earlier. Here I'm starting to look at adding some fat to him, making him feel more weighted. Now that we blocked everything all the way down to his toes, and then it's a cycle. You just keep doing that cycle over and over, but make sure that you don't over detail anything, because if that's not working, you're gonna have to go and spend much more time with that. So in this case, I feel pretty happy. I think his face is maybe ready for the next stage now that I went all the way down to his toes and coming back up. But before that, as I'm working, I tend to keep in mind the shading and the texture attributes, because I also don't want those to be competing with each other. So I try to see like what's the amount of wrinkles and little bumps on the skin that he has, so that I don't overdo it there, and then the texture is really basic and they don't balance each other out. So here's kind of a little closer view on the face and the head, kind of like the evolutions that we were just kind of looking at, but more specific on the head. So here I start to break it up with secondary forms, breaking out those big blocks into a little more manageable, asymmetrical, and also like not so perfect shapes, because he's a monster. I start to add a little bit, maybe secondary details, tertiary, just to break it up, just to hint at them. Not quite finished, just hinting at those things, making the wrinkles a little fatter. From there, I change the lighting again, like I was telling you earlier. It's a cycle, right? So I change the lighting. I might see something that I spot out that doesn't work here. They look great on the other side with the other lighting, but not so much here. So I feel like it's working pretty well. So now to add another level of breakup, I'm able to see this at a final shot, even though he's not textured yet. I feel like, okay, this is going somewhere, getting closer to finalizing the sculpture, or at least getting it to a good point. Change the light back around. Looks pretty good overall, but it feels like you can definitely see the integration between the little pimples and the little warts, and it's not working with the back. So then I start to kind of break that up to a more secondary, tertiary detail to start, and I go, I'm showing you the head, but I do this throughout the body. So I'll do a round of head, of adding all those pimples, and then go and add them on the rest of the body, and then work myself back up. Adding some more detail, adjusting the mouth, kind of tweaking those secondary shapes to add a little bit more breakup. So once that I'm happy, like at the previous stage, I'm pretty happy with the sculpture. I tend to zero mesh it, so it's a little cleaner, and not Dynamesh where it's millions and millions of polygons. Is a little more manageable. It's still millions. It's still like, I think 60 something, 64 million or so. But at least now I have resolutions too if I wanted to play with that. But it's a quick zero mesh. I only go ahead and do some major poly grouping to kind of help me with the overall, cleanliness of the whole thing, in case I wanted to make them talk, which I do. I also do some quick ZBrush UVs, and with the ZBrush UVs, I just make sure I take them to Maya, make sure they're UDIMs, so that I can get the maximum resolution I can. In this case, they're going to be 8K maps at 4 UDIMs. And then I started to block out the texture just the same way, kind of like doing some peaks and valleys or some cavity maps just to break up the base color. Then from there, I tend to add a little bit more like peaks and valleys and cavities, like that are kind of more spread out and broken up, and a few like just breakups of asymmetry on veining. Then from there, I tend to kind of go ahead and start doing some skin blemishes, Maybe he went outside one day, his skin is really sensitive, he burned himself. So I think I'm always thinking of those things, like his history. Some pigmentation, discoloration, making sure like he's not maybe getting scraped against things, or he has dry patches of skin, those type of deals. So start adding more and more what you would think of, like an old age character would have. Then I tend to add one thing that I really like is kind of referencing nature and looking at most characters or more creatures have a lot of brightness in their front of their face, and then towards the back everything gets darker. So I tend to add some of that too, where his back and arms, shoulders, and head have a little bit of darkness kind of going into the light and blending that together. And one of my favorite things to do, especially with this type of skin, and I really couldn't wait to do this, was adding veins, like tons of veins with different depths on them and different colors. So it really makes you feel fleshy and like really layered. I think that's like super important. So here, after I'm done with those textures, same thing. I just put it in the rest pose. I'm ready to just move on, test them out. I plug them in. See, there's not that many maps. There's only 3 maps. So from there, I have this testing it out in the actual scene. I do this a few times, maybe in between when I do like my first or second layer, test it out and be like, overall the colors are fine. Time to add more and then export it back out. I think in this case I did 4 versions. So now I can start seeing all those little veins and skin blemishes, all the little fine details, moles, blackheads, and start letting them resolve to see them more clearly in the 3D environment. I check a couple different angles just to make sure like everything is working, or if I need to tweak some areas more than others. In this case, I'm letting it resolve again. It just takes a couple seconds, and I move on to other areas of the face to make sure that all this stuff is kind of working like throughout, so that everything always feels the same level of finish everywhere. But I guess the main idea with this guy is trying to make it look as gross as possible. You will not want to touch this guy. So I check other angles that I might not be rendering right now, but I might want to have him go a step outside into the light, or maybe somebody has a torch and puts it closer to his face, and you could see all those details no matter where you kind of point that at. But it really adds a lot. This OmniSurface skin really helps bring this to life. And you saw how easy it was for me to kind of update all that. So once I'm pretty happy with all these results, and I'm ready for a final render, I just change the quality to be a little longer, from 128 to maybe 512, and then denoises it a little bit more, and then I can have an HD render that's done in a couple minutes instead of having to wait hours for this. So from there, here's a close-up of the render. So you could go pretty tight since everything is at 8K when you dim, so you're able to really like go in there and feel the fleshiness and the grossness of all this guy. And here's the final render of the hero shot that we established from the beginning. Now that we can see it, you can really feel the weight to his face, the weight to his skin, the grossness, the transparency. And I think this is the type of attributes that really bring it to life. Yeah, I hope you guys liked it. We're also pretty happy to announce that we'll be having an inaugural event for the Omniverse user group. So please come join us. It'll be on Thursday, August 12th from 5 to 6:30. It'll be an hour and a half where you can learn many things of different workflows, resources, best practices, and we can potentially win something from NVIDIA. So register at nvidia.com/cgraph. And I'd like to thank you guys for joining me in this quick insight of how to bring some realism to your characters and creatures. So if you have any questions, feel free to contact me or contact anybody at NVIDIA. Let us know if you'd like to see more of this content. You can contact me directly at miguelg@nvidia.com. And thank you again.